All right, welcome back to the Bolus Maximus podcast. My name is Matthew Taro. I'm here with my co-founder and co-host Brandon A. Denson. What's up, Brandon?
Hey, what's going on, guys?
Hey, how you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good, man. Thanks for asking.
It's a little early in Los Angeles. We've got a great guest with us today. Very excited. Brandon has been connecting with this individual and has talked very fondly of you, David Winkler, former co-founder, board chair, and current CFO of the Diabetes Research Connection. Welcome. Good morning. How are you, David?
Good morning. Great to be with you.
Very exciting. You look great. Did you shave this morning for us?
I did. I shave once a month, whether I need it or not.
Well, it's really exciting to speak with you, and talking directly as three men with diabetes. It's very interesting because, you know, we all have very different backgrounds, but I can guarantee that we've had some of the same emotions and feelings when it comes to diabetes. So I'd love to have you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about, you know, where you are right now, and then we can jump into some questions.
All right. Well, thanks. I was diagnosed at age 6. I'm 68 now, so I've lived with this disease since what I affectionately refer to as the Stone Age, because I literally was sharpening needles on grinding stones and boiling those metal needles along with glass syringes, getting puncture wounds and injecting NPH once a day, which would invariably cause me to experience hypoglycemia virtually every afternoon with its 8-hour peak. And I'm amazed and glad I've lived this long. I wasn't projected to have done so, and as many know, at least in the past, a lot of people didn't make it this long. But I think if anyone works diligently at eating well, staying fit, and most importantly, maintaining normal or close to normal glucose levels, one can have a long, prosperous life. And I feel like I've had one of those.
Yeah, God bless. It's very, very evident and really exciting to speak with you. So I think one piece of that Brandon and I have talked a little bit about just internally for the last couple of years has been mental health. So could somebody with a diagnosis of that long, if you don't mind, could you tell me a little bit about your mental health and, you know, maybe times that it wasn't so easy to do what you have been doing personally for yourself, you know, let alone the public goods and works that you do?
Well, I was told I wouldn't live past the age of 30. And there were times in my 20s when I was pretty depressed because another classmate of mine was also diagnosed at age 6, and he was gone at 27. Even today, 1 in 17 type 1 diabetics dies prematurely from the disease, typically from hypoglycemia, which is why it's so critical to stay on top of measuring glucose and making sure that you're getting nowhere near those bottoms. And today, it's generally said there's no reason why a type 1 diabetic can't live a normal lifespan. So I'm not happy that anybody gets diagnosed with this disease, but it's a great time to have diabetes. It's so much better today, and I've lived through that evolution of home urine testing, which was horribly inaccurate because, as most people know, urine is old news. It can stick around for 4 or 5 hours, and you have no idea what your current blood glucose levels are. So today, with continuous glucose meters, and I'll be happy to talk about at some point the loop system that I use. My blood glucose levels are normal 80 to 85% of the time. And I would really encourage people, if you have a way to do it, to get on these closed loop systems. So, and there's several that are available in the market right now. But yeah, over time, I considered dropping out of law school when I was in my 20s because, I said, heck, if I'm only going to be around another 5 years, why bother? But fortunately, my brother-in-law was an endocrinologist, and he said, look, if you take care of yourself, and he knew well in advance of the diabetes control and complications trial, which was released in the early 80s, that it was obvious that if you could get closer to normal blood glucose levels, you would be more like a normal person. And I was glad I listened to him, because from that point on, I made a point of not only eating well, but exercising every day. Today, I still walk 4 to 6 miles a day, and do other exercises. And I think if you exercise, you eat well, and you just maintain a positive attitude, you got it made. I mean, I wake up every day saying, I woke up today. This is a good day.
Yeah.
So
did you measure by sugar? Were you counting sugar initially before carbohydrates, right?
well, back in the old days, the American Diabetes Association had type 1 diabetics and type 2s on exchanges, and there was a typical breakfast might be 2 pieces of bread, a couple of eggs, and maybe some fruit. I would never eat that breakfast today, because it would send my blood sugar through the roof by within an hour after eating it. So I generally stick with a low carb diet, lots of vegetables, lots of fish, and it's working really well. And as we all know, as type 1s, when you are getting great results, then you try to stick with it to minimize those complications and feel a whole lot better. So it's sort of a positive feedback loop to take good care of yourself, and then I think it impacts your mental attitude as well as obviously your physical well-being.
Definitely. I'm glad you touched on that. And in regards to, your friend passing away so early, I want to send my condolences. Obviously, I know that was a long time ago, but, I think on a mental aspect, like you touched on, being in your 20s, seeing somebody die from something that you have and that you go through, that can be one, a tough time in general. But then I also think about it. It's like, hey, I live with this too. Is this going to happen to me? So I'm glad that you kept that positive mindset. Excuse me. I'm glad that you kept that positive mindset, but then also that you had kind of like that support from your brother-in-law, as well as being an endocrinologist, and him reassuring you, giving you that support. Like, look, you're fine. You can make it through this. These are the things that you may need to change, or you may need to take care of, so you can sustain a longer life. But I'm going to switch gears. I want to ask you, how was your support, I would say initially, from like your parents as you were diagnosed and, dealing with it, obviously being at the age of 6, I'm sure there was a lot of things that they had to help you out with. And, like how was that, growing up, and then when did you kind of take full control, like in your teenage years, or, as you were going to college and things like that, so how was your support early on, up until, I'll say about until college?
Well, I was very fortunate to have 2 great parents, both of whom cared a lot about me. They, I don't think, expressed their anxiety and concern over what my future might be. I subsequently learned from my siblings that they were quite concerned, but they never really showed it. And at least when I was first getting going, they were running my diabetes. I remember my father would always tell me, we got to do a urine test, and you got to pee in this cup. And I remember at a young age telling him he was going to have to pay for it if I was going to pee in that cup. And so, we would joke about it, but by the age of 9, I was doing my own injections. And, from that point on, I took basically the same dose of NPH every day. And it was tough for me in my junior high and high school years, because I played soccer and also played hockey. And invariably, as I said earlier, every day at 4 o'clock, I'd bottom out. So I would go run into the candy machine and eat some candy. I just must have naturally known what I needed to do. And then I would get home and my mother would find the candy wrappers and start yelling at me for eating candy. So
was she trying to get you to, was the thought more you should be prepared for this, or why are you eating candy as a, like, what would you normally have gone to? Juice, I guess?
well,
I guess it was
you
a
know,
lot
when
different, right? So
the problem was, say, at hockey, and all they had was vending machines, and they didn't have a lot of juice. Plus, any good type 1 diabetic, when they're experiencing a low, wants to eat all the stuff they don't get to eat.
We just want
Rest of the time.
we want everything at that point, right?
Yeah. I mean, you're eating everything in sight, hoping that you can pull out of it. But again, as I mentioned, these continuous glucose meters with alarms, they let you know well in advance, whether you're sleeping or not, that you're about to have a low, and you better do something about it before it gets serious. Because I hate to say it, even as an adult, I've still experienced some level of hypoglycemia. I can remember maybe 8 years ago or so, I was on a continuous glucose meter. Unfortunately, it was failing, which these things are not perfect, as I'm sure you know. My blood sugar was so low, I couldn't find my car in my parking lot. In the parking lot, I was getting quite desperate, and finally found it and had sugar in the car. So bottom line on that is, I just advise folks to always have glucose of some form with them. I'm not doing a plug for Mentos, but I've determined that 1 Mento equals 10 milligrams per deciliter, and they're pretty easy to carry. But there's glucose tabs. There's glue, which I think it's called that. It's a liquid that comes in a little pouch that you can break open. So that's critical, is to always have sugar with you. And if you're a type 1 diabetic, I probably don't need to tell you that. So
Man, you brought up Mentos, man, the fresh maker. Wow, like that's that's taking it back. I used to carry those around with me. So interesting.
yeah.
I'm gonna use this as an opportunity, because I think we could probably talk for a while about some more details of your upbringing, and I'd love to maybe do this again, but I'd really like to talk about the technology, because I think it's very exciting. And one of the most important things is, how do you get to where you are, right? You said earlier, and I want to make this a point, that you said, it's, as much as we don't want to say it's great that you got diagnosed, this is really a good time to be living with diabetes. It is. It's not a good time for all people in the community, but in general, living with diabetes right now is the best opportunity to take care of yourself and live a long, happy life. We focus and try to focus on underrepresented communities and underserved communities within the diabetes overall community. And so with technology, it's a journey, and it's something that, when you're a co-founder for a research center, that's a massive community effort, not just locally, but globally, right? Because you're starting this initiative. How did you get to wanting to do that? And then what technology have you seen anything come out of that, where technology has been a direct result of research done with the DRC? Anything like that you could talk about?
Yeah, well, I'm glad you brought up DRC, which stands for the Diabetes Research Connection. And I would encourage your viewers to check out our website. It's diabetesresearchconnection.org, all run together. It's not case sensitive. So that project I initiated with 3 professors at UCSD. We had started the Pediatric Diabetes Research Center at UCSD, which is still in existence, and the goal of that is to create a vertically integrated center that will take kids all the way up to adults, and then get them to endocrinologists and then subspecialists for whatever complications might occur. But we realized that in type 1 research that the first grant that most researchers get from the National Institutes of Health averages age 46. And there are these wonderful young scientists coming out of graduate school, they're early faculty or postdocs who are trying to explore new ideas. I mean, some of the best ideas come from folks who are in their 20s because they haven't been channeled yet, and they are trying to explore new possibilities. Einstein, for example, came up with the theory of relativity at age 26, and Edison came up with the light bulb in his late 20s. Granted, there was some work done before Edison came up with that, but the fact is he took the next leap. And so what we're trying to do is provide grants to these early career scientists who have innovative ideas. We have to date funded, we're just about at 50 projects. Now we fund each one for about $50,000. So they're able to develop preliminary data, which they can then use to apply for larger grants from National Institutes of Health or private foundations or folks like JDRF. So what's happened to date is that these researchers, for the 2 million or so we've given to date, have gotten over $12.5 million in follow-on funding. So about over a 6-time return on investment, if you will. The reason that we have done so well is that we have a scientific review committee of 70 of the top diabetes researchers in the United States, and they weigh in on these projects to ensure that they can be accomplished, that they're likely to succeed, that there's a mentor there and a facility in which the research can be conducted. And as a consequence, we're getting more applications than we can fund, which is great. But if any of your viewers are interested in helping to support these researchers, we have a commitment that if a specific research project is designated by a donor, 100% of their money goes to that researcher. So we don't take any overhead out of those direct commitments, which I don't know anybody else that does that. There are other folks who help cover the overhead. So it works out quite well. Excuse me. Anyway, the project is going really well, and the reason it's called Diabetes Research Connection is the connection between the donor and the researcher, such that we have the researcher communicate with the donors. They provide midterm reports and final reports. You asked earlier if there'd been any direct applications. Most of the research is very early stage. For example, one of our researchers is figuring out, using zebrafish of all things, how to get muscle and fat cell to make insulin to act like a pancreas, which is pretty cool. Another project involves creation of a synthetic beta cell that is genetically engineered such that that cell will not be destroyed either by the alloimmune or autoimmune systems that we all have. The alloimmunity is to foreign cells. So if you had somebody else's pancreatic cells put in you, you'd reject them unless you take immunosuppression drugs. And to date, the only experiments that have been done that look promising, but still involve either rejection of foreign cells so that people have to be immunosuppressed, or alternatively, if you were to take your own skin cells and reverse them to generic cells and then differentiate them to pancreatic cells, you would still reject those cells because of autoimmunity, which is what caused our diabetes in the first place. So with a synthetic beta cell, you don't have on the surface places where the cell can be attacked by the killer T cells. And so I hope I'm not getting too
No.
complicated here, but basically we're exploring a number of opportunities along those ranges, along that range. But to be more practical, one of the studies we funded was at Scripps Whittier Institute for Diabetes here in San Diego. And that was to show the efficacy or the benefit of using continuous glucose meters on diabetics in the hospital. And it proved what we thought was obvious, which is that you get better patient satisfaction, you get better outcomes, and you have shorter hospital stays when you use CGMs in the hospital. As a result of our $50,000 grant, Scripps got a $3.5 million grant from the NIH to expand the study, which is what they're running right now. And what we're hoping is, as a result of what is basically a clinical trial, that CGMs will be the standard in a hospital setting for any diabetic, whether they're type 1 or type 2. So there's an instance where we helped promote better care for type 1s using existing technology. But we're hoping for ultimately for the holy grail, which is some sort of biologic cure, so that none of us have to deal even with these closed loop systems.
No, that's super, super detailed. And everybody that's listening, I hope a lot of that stuff didn't go over your head, but it's on a, diabetes is such a deep disease. And I'm not discrediting anybody else that lives with a chronic illness or another disease, but there's a lot of things that kind of go into this that a lot of people don't know, from wearing the technology to help us save our lives every day. I think it becomes second nature for us. I mean, you've been living with this for over 60 years. It outweighs me and Matt together. You've been living with it for 3 times that we have. And it's, when we look at this, it's just one of those things that, I look at where I'm at in my stages of life and, things that I've been able to do. And then I hear you and I listen to you and the things that you've been able to do. And you've been nothing but a mentor to me. And just understanding that, like there's still more life to live. There's still more things to do. But I think with the technology aspect, I'm like on the fence, because I've been very privileged. I tell a lot of people this, I've been very privileged to always want to know what's next, whether it's cell phones, whether it's CD players, whether, especially when I got diagnosed. I remember being at the University of Michigan Hospital and I'm asking them like, man, I got to take shots. Like I got to do this for the rest of my life. And they're like, no, there's a machine that can help you. And, I was like, oh, sign me up. I want it. But, at that time they're like, no, we want you to live with it for a year. At that time, CGMs weren't around. And, for me, this may just me being biased. And I'm going to kind of side with you, David. In regards to, I think the most important thing is one, somebody understanding in their support system on how diabetes works. But I think the second component comes to the CGM aspect. And we go back and forth with a lot of people in the diabetes community on this specific topic in regards to having the access to CGM. What is a CGM? I know being African-American, being Black, being a person of color, when I talk to a lot of people, they're always saying that they don't want to be attached to something. And then, that's when I advocate and I say, well, you know what? I get it. I understand. You don't want to be attached to something, but this something can help save your life. And I remember speaking to a younger woman. She had a child. I believe he was 8 or 9 years old. And we just had a quick conversation. I let her know, that I wore a CGM. She was like, I just got on it. She's like, but it beeps in the middle of the night and it bothers me and it's this and that. So hearing these things, it frustrates me, but it's also a good thing because it's like they're taking the step to put a CGM or have their child use a CGM. And I simply asked her, I said, would you rather that beep in the middle of the night or your son, actually pass out and go into a coma or have a seizure? And then you get this different look on their face. It's like, wow, and it makes sense. I get it. what I, for me personally, I've been wearing CGM since I was in college. So would I rather it beep and wake me up and I can actually attend to it? Or would I rather somebody have to deal with the consequences of me not wearing that device? So I'll ask you this, like, what are some things, I know you're doing things with the Whittier Diabetes. Is it the Whittier Diabetes Center?
Yeah, I actually, I was chair of their board for a couple of years and on the board for 10 years. I'm still doing uh, assisting them and working with some of the folks over there. Most of my time now is spent on DRC.
Okay. But like, how can we get, I guess, from underserved, underprivileged, under-resourced demographics and areas, or just in general, people that aren't super knowledgeable about the technology, how can we get them involved? Because I know you brought up in regards to, diabetics that, especially type 1s, but type 2s as well, but that are actually in the hospital setting, but then they don't have a CGM, because we know a lot of people that are in those settings don't really understand the dynamics of diabetes. I know I was when I was had to go to a hospital before, like they put me on a diet plan, and they were like trying to give me insulin, and I was on an insulin pump, and it was just all these things. It's like, whoa, I know how to control my diabetes. And then like they had me just eating at mad, like a very, very strict schedule, which didn't work for me. But like, how can we get people involved in the clinical side so that they're more comfortable with, actually learning more about the CGM systems?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Scripps, because they operate through community clinics, and they can help with diagnosis as well as optimizing care for type 1s as well as type 2s. They have access to some programs, or can talk with folks about how to apply for insurance plans. And if they are over 65, Medicare now covers continuous glucose meters as well as pumps. And putting the pump together with the continuous glucose meter to get this automated insulin device. Some people call it an artificial pancreas, but it's really an automated insulin device, because it still doesn't know when you're going to eat or when you're going to exercise. You still have to input that data. But so again, over 65, Medicare's got it. Healthcare plans are available. I am not sure if some of the state plans here in California cover them or not. I guess it would be up to each individual to try to find out if there are state plans or insurance plans for which they would qualify. But it's generally accepted as a standard of care. And as I mentioned earlier, we're trying to get CGMs in the hospital as a standard of care, because if nothing else, it may introduce type 1s and 2s to the use of CGMs. Because think about it, if you test your blood sugar 8 or 10 times a day, which is fairly aggressive for most people, that's fairly frequent. That doesn't compare to the 288 times a day that a CGM tests your blood, because that tests your glucose levels every 5 minutes. And so those alerts are critical, as you said, and the more people that can get on them, the better. I don't know if Dexcom or some of the other CGM companies have programs to help folks who can't afford the cost of these things, but it really has become the standard of care. And there are groups like TCOYD, Taking Control of Your Diabetes, that have online seminars about how to better deal with the disease. There are other organizations like JDRF and ADA that can also be of some help. So I'm not aware of all the programs that are available, but one ought to really do a search online or go through their endocrinologist to try to find out.
We'll try to make some of those available. We can make some of those available in the details here when we put this out. So
Definitely.
but I think there is a gap. There is still a gap, right, between where research studies overall start and where the general public feels comfortable. Would you say that's?
Let me, can I?
Oh, you want to tailor
jump-
that question, Mr.
Yeah.
Denson?
Let me tailor. So if I'm grabbing this correctly, there's a huge disconnect, and I'll say from speaking of living as African American, as Black, there is a huge disconnect between Black people getting involved, I would say, in clinical trials or clinical research. And we want to help like bridge that gap. Like you said, people coming into the hospitals, I think that's a great entry point to get them to see the technology, get to actually use the technology, and also see the benefits of using the technology. Like I said, I'm one of those people that I've always been into technology, but people that aren't and don't want to switch up what they normally do, they're not going to switch it. That's just what it is. But how can we express and show different communities, people of color, Black people, how can we show them like that route of like, this is a better option long term? Because sometimes we don't look at it long term. We look at it, oh, I don't want to do this now. But how can we change the mindset to where they see the true benefits of this helping them long term, and also getting involved in clinical research and clinical trials?
Well, I think a lot of it starts with the principle of cherishing life. If you want to live a long time, I think everyone should do whatever they can to try to not only increase or enhance their longevity, but to increase and enhance their quality of life presently. I mean, think about how it is to have hypo or hyperglycemia. It's a drag. And if you don't like those feelings, whether you want to live a long time or not, I don't know why anybody would want to live with hypoglycemia or hyperglycemia. So it's pretty straightforward. I'm very sympathetic about access. I mean, that's a problem. But if one does not have a strong enough health insurance policy, it's possible that through a group policy, either through an organization. I mean, when I started my career, I was a real estate broker, and the California Association of Realtors had a group program that I could get into as a single. Well, I had my own company, but I was the only person in it, and I couldn't qualify for a group plan. So if there's ways you can get in group plans or go through government subsidies or whatever, I just encourage people to get the best care you can, because ultimately your life is so much easier and better. These automated insulin devices have taken away a tremendous burden. I mean, I can go practically an entire day without even looking at my diabetes.
We can talk about that. Let's jump into that, because I'm interested in asking you what you're using. We haven't talked about it. We've been talking for 30 minutes. I don't know how you get insulin into your body. Could you tell us what you're currently using, David?
Yeah, I'm not endorsing any products. I'm just telling you which ones I'm using. I use the Dexcom continuous glucose meter. That feeds a signal into my cell phone, which then tells my Omnipod pump, which is made by a company called Insulet, how much insulin to give me. The reason I like the Omnipod pump is it has no tubes. There are other companies that have tubed pumps, and they work fine. The various companies have different algorithms to determine how to adjust the insulin dosing, and some seem to be better than others. One would have to look up the research on that as to who's got the best feedback loop at this point. But that's it. I mean, I have to tell you, this was a quantum leap in the care of T1Ds. I participated in a clinical trial to show the efficacy of these closed loop systems, and the FDA has approved them as a result of the amazing results that we've gotten. I mean, I won't say it's almost like not having diabetes, because as I said, you still got to adjust for exercise and food. But other than that, I mean, this is phenomenal technology. It's
wild. It's really wild. And I
Yeah,
use Omnipod. Actually, he's used a loop too, but
We
On
want
the other
to.
hand, I got to tell you, it's not a cure.
No.
You know, occasionally there's CGM failure, occasionally there's pump failure,
Pod failures are the worst.
occasionally the insulin goes bad. You know, there are things that can go wrong in the system, and that's why you got to stay on top of it. But I feel like the burden of T1D has been reduced significantly by these closed loop systems. So,
You've been able to walk it all the way from the very beginning of, you know, boiling syringes and, you know, and taking MPH, and, you know, and I think like when you're, you know, I look at you as I don't want you to take this wrong way, but you're a pioneer in this space because you've been able to literally go through every single stage and phase and see every piece of technology from the beginning of time actually in progress, in work. But not only that, you've been able to help fund some of these projects that have come to life, which is, I mean, I give you huge kudos for that, because not only did you see something and it's like, hey, I live with this, but I want to help other people be able to live as long as me by being able to set up an organization that allows for research that for people that are actually in that field to make this a possibility for people to live a longer life. So I commend you on that, David.
well, thank you. And I commend you folks for running this show, because the more people you can get to out there who may not be aware of some of the technology or some of the information that's available out there is great. I think you two are doing fantastic work here, and I really encourage you to keep it going, because we need to get the word out. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't know that this technology is even available. And I'm sorry to say there are even a lot of internists and general practitioners, but also even some endocrinologists that are not completely on top of the system. So I encourage people to do their own research. I mean, I'm like you, Brandon. I'm a bit of a techie, and I want to be on the cutting edge of whatever's coming out, as long as it works.
I want it long as it provide it makes my mental and my life easier. Then I'm good. I'll take that learning curve that it takes to understand it, because I know what it's going to do for me in the long run, and that's the most important thing.
Yeah, exactly.
I think this conversation has been really exciting for both sides, and I'd really like to follow up and have another one in the future where we can talk a bit more about the DRC, about the efforts, and maybe bring some people in and talk about their experience. You know, individuals you've worked with for a long time. I want to thank you one more time. We'll wrap up here with one more question, and I'd like to ask you, what would you tell your 6-year-old self today? If you could speak to yourself, what would you tell yourself at 6 years old?
If I was 6 years old today, I would say you're going to live a long, prosperous life. You're going to live a normal lifespan as long as you take good care of yourself, and stay current on technology, and use, to the extent you can, whatever is available to make your life better and as normal as possible. But there's no reason to be discouraged with a diagnosis of type 1 diabetes. As someone said, if you're going to have a disease, this is probably the one to have, because there's a whole lot worse diseases out there.
We live with it, you know. It's definitely a good point about living with diabetes as opposed to having it, you know.
Yeah.
So I think that's a valid point.
Definitely.
Think about prospering with it.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I think Brandon and I have gotten to a good place, so we can understand and appreciate that. That's what we're trying to put out there. So
hey, we live with diabetes, but it doesn't define who we are or what we're capable of doing.
Yeah, exactly. And you guys are doing it. So
David,
thank you.
is there anything else you want to leave behind? Well, like we said before, we'll leave some links for everybody so that they can follow up with the DRC. They can learn a bit more about some of the organizations that we talked about and initiatives. But was there anything else that you wanted to leave behind here today before we leave?
I encourage folks, and you've already got an active audience. I encourage all type 1s and type 2s for that matter to get engaged, to volunteer, to try to help the cause so that the next generation doesn't have to deal with this disease.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. We're trying to, Brandon and I say all the time, we don't do a lot of the stuff that we do. We don't do it for ourselves. I mean, yeah, we do a lot of what we do for ourselves, where we create and it's fun. Like, this is an engaging conversation. We love doing this, but in reality, this conversation is to benefit individuals who are 6 right now.
Yeah.
And in 10 years are starting to learn more about where individuals like Brandon, myself, and you have put so much effort into. So we thank you from the full community. We don't usually speak for the full community, but I'm going to say thank you. And we appreciate what you've done and where you've come from. I'm really excited to speak with you again in the future. So thank you for some time this morning. Great to meet you, David.
Thank you,
Great.
David.
And
Appreciate it.
thanks to both of you.
Oh,
Appreciate it.
definitely.
Take
All right.
care.
And as always, Brandon, take us home.
Keep it 100.
All right.
Peace.
Take care. Peace.
Take care. Bye-bye.